to do is actually create a new type of game, one that takes everything that's great about an MMO and a TCG and rolls them into one. The idea being that they both rely on one thing very specifically, which is community. So what we've done is take what's great about an MMO, which is the ability to level up a character, play with your friends, join a guild, work together as groups, and then roll that into all the things you would expect in terms of game design from a TCG. Deep strategy, all the ability to tell stories through the cards, all the things you love about collecting and deck building and everything else. And when we bring those two things together, I know you all heard me say this many times if you watched me speak at all, we roll those things together to become much greater than the sum of their parts. It's the chocolate and peanut butter invention. Great individually, they can bring them together even better. So we have, as I've mentioned, guilds, world exploration quests, dungeons, raids, loot drops, everything you could expect from an MMO, with the exception of a 3D world. So this is not your traditional third-person action RPG. You're not in a virtual space, sharing that virtual space with other people. You're actually navigating through maps and menus and dungeons that are very beautifully illustrated and with lots of little 3D effects and glows, and you're clicking on places, and you're going to cities that are these really neat parallaxed sort of three-dimensional paintings. And the goal there was to create a nice tie back into the art style of a TCG so that everything looks very, very illustrated, but still gives you the feel of moving through a real world and being in proximity to other people and have the ability to chat with them and trade with them. Go to the next slide then. So some of the very specific features, again, many of you have heard these things before: auction houses, peer-to-peer trading, in-game mail. We have Chris has put together this incredible AI that has the best AI that's ever been created for a trading card game. And we also have created this thing called Ada, which is going to be a system that actually helps you build decks. So we're going to have an automated deck assistant that uses AI to tell you what kinds of cards would go into your deck and make your deck much better. Chris, why is that important?
Well, kind of branching into a TCG is really difficult because a lot of the strategies of TCGs aren't immediately obvious. Like, something that is basically just a math equation is, what is my resource base look like? And that's actually very hard to get right, and in a way that people will often kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And so they play the game and they're not playing very well, their deck's not performing well, and it's hard to zero in on why. So the whole point of the artificially intelligent deck assistant is you build, like, I want to do this particular combo, or I'm interested in this suite of cards, I want to make a human deck, whatever, and then give it to Ada, and it comes back and says, okay, so here's the resource base that's going to make this work, and make sure that you can, drop this on turn 5 when you want to get it out. And here's some of the stuff that's not really working to your strategy. It may look good on paper, but the statistics of it are really low. So Ada is just basically a big stats engine that makes sure that statistically the deck performs the way it's going to perform in your head, and kind of brings that together. So it's really just an aid for people to deal with the more ticky-tacky, not super exciting part of deck building, so you can concentrate on, I'm going to get a dragon to play and just wreck shit. And then Ada comes back and it's like, okay, well, here's how we're going to get there, and make sure you don't accidentally lose to a bunch of 1/1s while you're trying to get to wreck shit time.
And one of the fun things about Ada also is that you can put together a deck with some weird bits and pieces, and then it'll help you fill in the blanks. So that for me is actually pretty exciting. Like, here's some crazy card combos I want to work. How do I fill in the components that would actually make this occur? Or give it just some random cards and see what it comes up with. Yeah, and that's actually kind of fun too. Go to the next. Oh, I'm sorry, not the next slide. So some of the other features that we have, again, trying to go fast. Socketing, we have the ability to have cards with sockets, so you can actually put gems into them, and that actually does work in PvP, so we'll be talking a little bit more about that and how we balance that. Double backs, you can flip every card over twice, and on the back there are things like achievements and experience bars and stats on how the card's done, so every card is a unique item in the game. Equipment, each card comes with 2 pieces of equipment, and that's part of the PvE portion of the game, which we'll be talking about in another panel. We also have the ability to level up characters and choose from talents, and we also have card transformations. So we've got all these crazy things. Basically, we had this, TCGs have had a canvas, and over the last 20 years, they've painted over that canvas so many times. They've covered it edge to edge. They've painted over the top of itself, 100 times over. But when we decided to make the game digital only, we sort of unrolled the whole, spool of canvas and have just unlimited space. It's absolutely outrageous how much design freedom we have with the game by making the decision that we're going to be digital only. Show the next slide then. So Ben's going to talk a little bit about the PvP set. I should have introduced myself. I'm sorry, I'm Cory Jones. I'm the president and CCO of Cryptozoic. This is Ben Stoll. Ben Stoll is the lead PvP designer. And then there is Chris Woods, and he is...
You can't remember my name?
You think that's the case?
Yeah, I'm not sure anymore. I don't know.
I was trying to decide how well the many things you do how to introduce you. Lead engineer, he was also in charge of the PvE experience. Chris is sort of magical in that he has really great opinions about everything. And so that's Ben and Chris, they're going to talk through some of this stuff. More specifically, Ben and Chris is going to talk a little bit more about the PvE stuff, which is our next panel.
I'm just going to heckle Ben, to be honest.
Yeah, there you go, perfect. So one of the things we wanted to do was give you a little insight into how the decisions are made in terms of how we build a PvP set, what are the goals, and also what are the focus in terms of where we place importance. Like I've said many times, draft for us is a very important issue. Draft is one of the most popular ways to play the game, and balancing and designing a set around draft is a very specific function. And I don't believe that a lot of the companies out there that are trying to make digital TCGs are card companies first, they're digital companies first, which is great, and they'll make very polished, beautiful games. But with no actual TCG designers, they don't know to ask the question about how do you balance a set for draft, and they wouldn't know how to answer it if they did know how to ask the question. So it really puts them in a weird position in terms of putting in functionality that really has no back-end design structure. And that's one of the things that we've really focused on. I mean, 6+ months of just balancing for draft alone. And that's what I think has given us one of the best draft sets I've ever had the chance to play. Ben, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the stuff we go through in PvP?
All right, cool. So when this PvP set design is when we set out to build the first set of Hex, which is very large, it's about 360 something cards that you can get out of packs. What do we do? How do we get there? And what was our philosophy and stuff like that? And so this is both some of the cards we'll be using in the PvE stuff that was alluded to, the RPG, the MMO half of the game. But these are also the cards you'll be using for tournaments, to play, just pick up games with your friends, to play in leagues and all that stuff. So most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today is kind of game mechanics from that kind of perspective. But the first thing I'll mention is, story is the first bullet point up here. So we're trying to, of course, immerse you in this world of Entrath, and there's a very big, long, rich storyline that's going to peel back layer by layer over the coming years. And so you get plunged in right away, and you're in the middle of this conflict between two factions, the Ardent and the Underworld. And there's 4 races in each faction, and each one of them has a lot of specific, reminder. Okay, yeah, let's do that right now today. Okay, no, let's not do that. Okay.
You need to back up your computer, Ben.
Okay. And so those, so we're right at the heart of that conflict. And the other thing that's going on is this giant comet has just crashed through the planet, and that comet is the namesake of the game, Hex. And with it, it has brought all kinds of new different types of magic, and this has done all kinds of stuff to heat up the conflict and things. So the set is first of all trying to throw you right into the middle of that conflict. And a lot of the cards center around those different races and things like that. So we see 2 goals in mind. What that means is we're really trying to make 2 formats awesome and fun, and I believe that we did. We have limited, which the crown jewel of our limited formats is booster draft, which is, we each sit down, we have 3 packs, and we're gonna draft a card out of each pack and kind of build a deck. We're sit at a table, everyone's gonna take 1 card, pass their pack to the left, and so we are building our own deck, and it's kind of a nice experience in that it's a kind of great equalizer. You don't have to have 30 legendary rares, legendary cards or anything to be able to compete. Everybody just starts at the same ground level with that. And then the other major goal would be constructed. So this is where you take 60 of your favorite cards, build your favorite deck. As Chris suggested, you could build a deck with dragons trying to wreck shit, or you could build a deck with a bunch of rabbits trying to overrun your opponent, or some sort of crazy combo. That's where you get your sense of creative ownership. You unleash your great creation onto your unsuspecting opponent. So we're trying to do those 2 things both with the set at the same time, which is a very fun and challenging task. And we'll get more into that more specifically in a bit. Shard definition. So in Hex there are 5 shards, and each one of these shards allows for different gameplay opportunities and also just different experiences. I mean, Hex is by the way, somebody just kick me if I'm just rambling way too long. Chris, that's your job, okay. So there are many different types of people that want to engage in a game like Hex, and we want to offer all of them whatever particular experience they want. So some people, their whole mission in life is to just get dragons in play, make something awesome happen, attack with gigantic troops. Some people want to ruin their opponent's life, make their opponent have as bad a time as they can. So we've got the ability to shuffle booby traps into their deck and destroy all their stuff. And every time you do something fun like draw a card, I'm going to punish you. So we have that kind of stuff. Some people like to just they don't really care about attacking or winning. They just kind of want to feel safe and secure and that kind of thing. So that's all there partially in the shard definition. The racial definition is kind of another overlay we put onto all the cards in the set. So I mentioned before the 8 races. Each one of them has a very distinct feel, and this is where we are merging story with gameplay mechanics. So for example, the orcs, you'll come to realize that violence is at the epicenter of their entire culture. And so what does that mean? We want when you play an orc deck, we want you to actually feel like you're playing a race of these very violent, very brutal, very vicious, orcs. So we also have some of that there. I mentioned the Shin Hair are just all about breeding tons of rabbits, training them into warriors, and then just overrunning your opponent. So that's what the Shin Hair culture is all about, and we want the deck to also feel that way. And so deck diversity, play pattern diversity, it's right in there with that. I mean, to slice the pie even further ways, we have. We always have this. There's this traditional struggle that's in a lot of TCGs between aggressive decks and control decks. So there's kind of 2 main economies in a TCG like Hex. There's this kind of card advantage, which is as the game goes on, I'm gonna be getting more and more powerful stuff available to me, versus tempo, which is like I've got the quick draw on you, and so I'm putting a lot of stuff into play really quickly. It's hard for you to deal with. And can I kill you before you get your master plan online? So all that stuff is there. I mean, this is, I like to harp on this a little bit because this is part of what makes Hex a fully fledged TCG. It's every game you sit down with your opponent, you can expect something different because you're bringing your unique experience, your unique personality translated through your deck with your own unique strategy. You're bringing that to the table, and your opponent's doing the same thing. And every game is going to play out very differently because of that. And that's one of the reasons why I think a product like this is something you'll be able to really sink your entire self into. It's very rich and deep, and there's lots and lots of stuff to explore. Okay, so balancing the numbers. So this is some of the kind of more how do we come up with some of the numbers that that we did? We're not just arbitrarily picking this stuff like 360 cards. That sounds about right. Fine. So this is kind of some of why we made those decisions. The set size, so the first set is very large, 360 cards, partially because we know a lot of people that are coming into Hex are coming from a TCG background already. They have an expectation for a deep, rich, robust format that's going to be, that they can engage in right away, but also that they can engage very deeply in. And so we wanted a large set. I mean, there's a lot of kind of basic stuff in here. It's a set 1. We have a lot of kind of building blocks. There's some basic, simple effects we need, like destroy target troop. That's a card that we have. But we also want to make sure the set's very deep, and so that's why the set is so large. And then,
how do you feel about the varieties of rares, given that it's a very large set? So, is there a lot of different stuff that you're going to be able to do?
Yes, yeah, it's a great point. And again, that was one of the biggest priorities is how can I do a jillion different things? And I mean, there are a ton of decks you can build. There's all the racial decks you can build. There's crazy combo decks you can build that have nothing to do with the races. There's powerful control decks you can build, and that's all baked into the set size as well. The large set size facilitates a lot of different deck strategies for both constructed and limited. And I'll get to that. I'll get to the limits specifically in a little bit, but a wide range of different archetypes you can draft. For anybody in here who already knows that draft is something that they love, our draft format is extremely deep, and the large set size does facilitate that. Card types. So just a little bit. We have several different card types in Hex, and it's the exact breakdown on how we got to each one is not too exciting. We have a certain number of quick actions, which are things you can do on your opponent's turn. So we have a certain number of them so that there's some excitement, but not so much that there's always crazy stuff happening on your opponent's turn. We have a lot of troops because troops are kind of always useful. So, I mean, there's some stuff like that. Rarity kind of functions, serves 2 roles. In Constructed, it serves this role of kind of complexity. It's like we want to put a simple text box at common because if we have a lot of simple stuff going on in common cards are the ones you're going to see the most often, so you're not going to be overwhelmed. We want to put something that's totally crazy and over the top going on, we put it at rare, so that you're not reading a paragraph of text every time you look at a card. As well as, there's a fun kind of pack opening experience of, I opened a pack, and if you remember the first time you opened a totally sweet rare and showed called your friend and told them, if that was happening with every single card, it kind of takes away some of the specialness of that. So that's where some of the rarity is there for excitement and complexity for constructed. And in limited, we really use the granularity of common and uncommon to most important effect in limited, where we say, this is where we're really fine-tuning the architecture of draft by saying, we want this card showing up exactly this much, we want this card showing up exactly this much, yada yada.
So on card types, one thing that's interesting about quick actions is all the other major TCGs now, like Soulforge or Hearthstone, don't have them. Why do you think quick actions are such a big deal?
Yeah, I think that quick actions are a big deal because what I think is at the heart of personally every great TCG that I would consider a truly great TCG is tension. And next time you're playing your favorite TCG, you could just, or Hex, just pay attention, to whether or not the game is kind of making you feel at the edge of your seat. And every part of Hex's game engine is kind of deliberately crafted, really with that in mind. I would almost say primarily above everything else. Which is, as far as the actual gameplay goes, which is to kind of say, I don't know what's going to happen next. There's just enough sense of control and consistency that you feel like, I'm a skilled player, I'm engineering my strategy and all this stuff, but there's also always a sense of uncertainty. What's my opponent going to do? I'm not quite sure how effective his next turn is going to be. Is he going to play his 5th resource, or is he not? Is he going to activate his charge power? I don't know. And quick actions are they are quintessentially that. When my opponent has resource points up on my turn, I have no idea. I'm not quite certain that I'm going to, my turn is going to go as smoothly as I want, because he might do anything.
But that works both ways, right? Also, when you hand him his turn, he can't just do whatever he wants. You can get
correct.
involved.
Right, and so it just layers in all this extra stuff. I mean, there's bluffing, there's, and you also get the counterpoint when your opponent has no resources up and can't play a quick action. You have this feeling of total security that you don't usually get. And again, that whole breadth of emotional experience is what I think a real giant TCG needs. So development. I don't know what I'm supposed to say about development. We play test the cards and make sure they're not too powerful, but make sure they're powerful enough to be fun. That's kind of what development is.
Well, I did actually a lot of development on this game. I'm not officially a developer, but we were drafting 2-3 times a week, and often it would be like Ben would hand me weird rare that just was nonsense. I'm kind of the crazy person of the group, so they give me the stuff that's like, what are you going to do with this? And I'd come up with some, just completely berserk or bizarre strategy with it. There's a couple rares that they actually nerfed. Everyone's like, there's no chance this could be anything, that you could find these really just crazy clever combinations with it, and they're like, okay, we're going to have to dial this back a bit because that's disgusting. So development has been mostly us staying up till like 9 or 10 at night just playing this game over and over again.
So sorry for you.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I gotta be honest with you. It's terrible. I don't know.
9 or 10, are you going home early?
What's that?
Say 9 or 10, are you going home early?
Okay, so again, we have a couple cards up here. I don't know if everybody can see that or not, but so we have constructed, and we're just going to show a few cards just to kind of show that there's a lot of texture. There's different strategies you can facilitate. So over here, this guy on the right, the Savage Raider, he's a 1 cost. He's got 2 attack and 1 defense, so he's very aggressive, very overstated troop, and he has to attack each turn if able. So he's a very good troop to throw into your orc deck, where it's just all beat down. I'm throwing a bunch of guys in the play, and I'm trying to overwhelm you as fast as I can. This guy, the Ancient Sentinel, kind of shows that there are cards that will reward you for having a very specific min-maxed kind of deck strategy. He's got Steadfast, and he's a 3/7, so he's very defensive and back-heavy, and he says you pay 3 less to play him, so he only costs 5, if you control no troops. So if you're willing to build a deck that is, all actions and constants and things like that, and doesn't have any troops, you get a lot of mileage out of this guy. And then he says when you play a non-troop, gain 1 health. So we have cards like that can kind of be fun for the deck building experience to say, okay, I might take this guy as my starting point and see what I can do with him. Then we have this guy, the Wrathwood Colossus. So this guy is basically just enormous. He's a 9/9. He's got Crush, which means whenever he is blocked, his extra damage will spill over to the defending champion. And he's got Steadfast, which means when he attacks, he doesn't exhaust, so he's still at the block. And then he says only one troop can attack each turn, and only one troop can block each turn. So basically, this guy comes across every turn, and your opponent can block him with one guy, and every turn your opponent can only send one guy back at you, and this guy's always at the block. So this guy's very fun. He's very fun for the kind of the gamer who just wants to have the most enormous, most powerful guy on the board. And it's also kind of fun because you kind of get to taunt your opponent, because no matter how many troops your opponent has in play, chances are any given one of them is not as big as this guy. So this guy just kind of comes down and says, you know, you have to battle me in the arena one-on-one, and I'm the king of the arena, so, you know, suck it or whatever. We have this.
That's actually the flavor text.
Yeah, that's the flavor text.
Please do that now.
So we have this guy, the Chaos Key. So this guy is interesting. This is kind of a card that's, you know, it's a 2-cost artifact, and you pay 5 and you void it, which means it gets out of the game forever, and you void anything in play. So this is kind of a card that we put in the set as kind of we call it a development safety valve, where it's like any different shard has access to this. It's a removal spell. It's very slow and it's not that cost effective. But if you're playing, for example, like the Wild Shard, which doesn't have tons of access to removal because it's too busy throwing powerful monsters into play, you can kind of, if you really decide you want a removal spell, you can opt to pay a little bit more and get this Chaos Key. So again, we really want to make sure that whatever exact experience you want out of building your deck is available to you. If you want to build an all-Wild deck, but you also feel like you need removal and Wild doesn't offer you that, you can pick up a Chaos Key.
Now, I don't want to sidetrack you too much from the actual card design here, but one of the cool things about a lot of things in this game is like Chaos Key voids cards because we have a whole group called the Void Society, and they live in a completely different dimension, and it's kind of this very Lovecraftian, Cthulhu-esque world where they're trying to prevent those monsters from spilling over into our dimension. And so it's called the Chaos Key, and it voids things because it's a key that opens a door between these two dimensions. So in theory, you're throwing your opponent's creature through to hell, basically, which is kind of a fun little thing to have.
So here's a couple cards we're going to talk about for limited, for the booster draft format. First up, we have this guy, the Terabot. So for starters, you'll notice he's a robot dinosaur, which is pretty sweet already, I guess. And he's friends with the Dwarf faction, which is actually my personal favorite race. And they're all very small. They're not very well equipped for combat, but they're all about getting these crazy inventions and contraptions into play, and these crazy artifact robot type troops into play. So this guy says you pay 1 less to play this troop for each artifact and or dwarf you control. He's a 3/4 that flies, and he costs 7. So you can actually get this guy into play quite quickly in a draft format. He's a common, so you'll see an average of a little over 2 of this guy in a given booster draft. And if you're drafting a dwarf strategy, that's one of the kind of very specific archetypes you can draft. You know, you're kind of just looking for dwarves, artifacts, and other cool stuff that goes well with them. And this guy can be quite powerful. So these cards are kind of trying to showcase that when you sit down to draft, there's lots of different stuff you can do. You can kind of do a very hardline archetype like the dwarf deck, there's also synergies you can get that are just kind of work, a card that works all by itself. Like I like this guy a lot, Briar Legion. He's a 3-cost 2/2, and he says when he enters play, each Briar Legion, which is this guy, you own in all zones gets permanent +1/+1.
That includes your collection.
Yeah, so all zones, meaning when you play this guy, he boosts himself, he boosts all the Briar Legions, and you're in play, the ones in your hand, the ones in your deck, they all get boosted up. So it's very fun when you see one of these guys in a booster draft, and you know you're like, well, I'm going to pick this guy, and then everybody starts shipping them to you, and you get a million of them, and it's a very, very fun experience.
A neat thing about Terabot too is with the dwarf strategies, Terabot is good, but it means nothing to anybody that's not going dwarves. So if you go early dwarves, the Terabots end up being free, and you end up getting a flying 3/4 way late in the draft, which is just nonsense. You're not supposed to get that.
Right.
So it's cool that that guy sits there and rewards you for going dwarves, where you can be like, yeah, I'll pass the Terabot. I know he's just murder on a stick, but he's going to come back because nobody else is dwarves, so they can't even use this guy right.
Right, and then that's where a lot of the real deep strategy, the more you draft, starts to come in is you know, can I count on this card maybe even getting back to me? Is anybody going to take it? You know, how valuable is this card to everybody else? Yeah, all that stuff. Okay, where's the... missing.
You skipped over one.
I skipped over one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that guy right there.
Okay, so these are a couple other limited cards. So this is shards of. Good God! All right.
We really don't want to show you these two cards.
So this first card, Shards of Fate. This is actually a non-basic resource, and it gives you access to any any threshold of a resource that's in your deck. So it helps you kind of fix your thresholding to play your cards more easily. Which is again another really, it's a common. It's very powerful actually in draft, and it's kind of a nice texture to weave into draft because you have to decide, you know, do I want to pick this card? Is my deck powerful enough, and I'm more worried about playing it more smoothly, or do I need to pick up on the more powerful card? This guy on the right, Corrupt Harvester, is an uncommon, so he'll show up a lot less frequently in draft, but still some amount of consistency. And this guy's kind of to show that you don't always have to go all in on some crazy strategy. You may not want to commit to something like Dwarves or Shin Hair or something that's very all in. You may just want to draft a deck that's got like some powerful guys, some powerful removal effects, and you know, some guys with evasion, and that's the end of the experience that you want. And this guy is just kind of good no matter what the context of your deck is. He's 3/3 for 4, and he's got life drain, which means whenever he deals damage, you're going to heal up that much. And he also can't be blocked except by Artifact and Blood Troops, so he's very powerful. So this part, it says limited up there, but it's supposed to say, yeah, synergies. So just to kind of show a little bit more of the fun stuff you can do, different card interactions. There's kind of different synergies woven into the set. Again, so you know, you build a fun deck that works together. It is part of the fun of all the systems we're trying to put into Hex. So you have this card, Pact of Pain, pay health, draw cards. This is good on its own, but there's also other cards in the set that make it more effective. Life Siphon is a card that costs X, so you can funnel as much resource points into it as you want, and then it will deal X damage to the opposing champion and heal you for that much. So it's a very powerful card, and when you're paying health to draw a bunch of cards, it's a good way to recover from that. Some of the synergies are a little less open-ended than that. They're a little hand-holdy. Like this guy, the Legionnaire of Gawain, says when he enters play, for each card that inspired him, you deal 1 damage to everything on the opponent's side. So inspire, for those of you who don't know, is this human keyword where the human tribe is all out. This inspire effect, which is when a troop enters play that has cost more than the guy with inspire, he gets some benefit. And so this guy will get all the inspire benefits, and he'll take everything out on the opposing side. Blessing the Fallen is a constant that says troops you control are inspired by troops with inspire in your graveyard. So even your guys that have died, that have kind of fallen before, are still going to use their inspire powers. So again, a very powerful combo and effect that gives you kind of lots of late game inevitability.
Blessing the Fallen's also awesome because you just recover as humans. Like sometimes things go wrong, your opponent just wipes the board and just lets you get right back in the game.
Yep. And then this last one is kind of cool. We see this guy, the Chimera Guard Outrider. He's a 4-cost 0/4, and he says when he attacks, he gets plus attack. Although we actually changed this guy, someone gave us some good feedback. He actually says while he's attacking, he gets plus attack equal to his defense this turn. So he's always going to be a 4/4 when he attacks because he's got 4 defense, but he also kind of begs the question, what kind of cute ways can I find to increase this guy's defense to make him even more effective? And so, for example, one of the ways you can do that, we have this card called Radiant Armor, which says target troop you control gets a permanent +1 defense for every diamond threshold you have. So that can be a very, very powerful combo. So here's gem socketing. As Cory mentioned earlier, we have 20 different gems that you can socket your cards with. And if you have a minor socketable card, you can socket it with 10 of the gems, the lesser gems. And if you have a major socketable card, you can socket it with any of the 20 gems, including the major gems. So, so these guys are a lot of fun because they're also fun for draft because you can kind of pick them up and then figure out exactly what you're going to do with them later. But they're also just fun for constructed because it's like you kind of get to make your own card out of these things. Like just to give you a few examples of what I can do, this Grimskull Sorcerer is a 2-cost 1/3. So we could just give him a +1/+1 gem. Pretty simple, just make him a very effective overstatted 2-drop. We could give him the gem that says you can play him anytime you can play a quick action. So we talked about the combat tricks earlier. You can surprise your opponent when your opponent swings in with a 2/1. You can play this guy at a quick speed and block him and take him out. Or if we wanted to, maybe we have a deck that's got a lot of removal and we feel like we can clear my opponent's board of all of his troops very effectively, maybe we give this guy the gem that says whenever he deals damage to the opposing champion, they discard a card. So we're really going all in on trying to make sure this guy connects. So there's lots of stuff that we can do with that guy. The Battle Beetle over here, which I don't know if you can quite see it, but it's two giant bugs riding a more giant bug, and they're chasing a herd of deer through the forest. So it's one of my personal favorites.
This happens in our world.
So this guy's a 6/4 with Crush, and you can give him Flight. If you pay 3 resource points, you can give him Flight for the turn. And again, this guy, there's lots of powerful stuff you can do with this guy. You can give this guy the gem that says when he enters play, he battles something else, so you can deal 6 damage to an opposing troop right away. You could give him a gem that says when he enters play, you boost something else you control equal to his defense. If you're kind of trying to, you have an investment, for example, the Chimera Guard Outrider, if you wanted to get another way to boost his defense in. So yeah, lots of cool stuff you can do.
How many different gems are we going with at the beginning?
There's 20 gems available right out of the gates. So, and that's basically 4 for each shard.
And those are incidentally all unique. They're not like +1 strength, +2 strength, +3 strength. No, they're all completely different effects.
And some of them are actually kind of funky too. I mean, like we have one of them that gives you a larger stat boost, but also increases the cost of the card you're playing by 1. So it's like, you know, there's lots of weird stuff you can do there. Okay, transformation. So one of the fun things, you know, that we have a lot of running around in the set is cards that transform into other cards. So you can see this is the Incantation of Fear. There's actually, this is a cycle, there's more of these in the set. And you can see there's these guys here, these hooded guys, and they're summoning this horror, this nightmare over here. And so it says whenever a card enters the opposing graveyard, you get an incantation counter, and then when you get up to 5 incantation counters, the incantation itself transforms into this horrible nightmare. And he's a 6/4, and at the start of your turn, you can look at the top card of your opponent's deck, and you can choose to bury it if you want to. So again, very, very mean and not very nice card that lets you can just destroy your opponent's favorite card from the top of their deck every turn. Yeah, and you'll notice incidentally the nightmare is burying your opponent's card. So if you get another incantation out, cute little side synergy, he'll help that one get online faster too. Okay, and here's the construction plans. It's something that dwarves do. You can exhaust an artifact troop or a dwarf troop to add a construction counter to a plan. So you can see it's kind of like a little construction plan written out here. And then when you get enough construction counters, it actually builds itself into the thing you're building, the inspiration engine in this case, which is another very fun card. You activate it and it creates a random artifact and puts it directly into play. So that's from all the artifacts that exist in Hex. You're going to get one of them at random, and you can get one every turn, you activate it, and so it's a lot of fun because then you get to figure out what your strategy is as you just keep putting more and more random stuff into play.
So that also means for like 3 years from now, you'll be pulling from a much larger sort of pool of artifacts you may get. You actually get the Lotus, right? Pulling from every artifact.
Yeah, I suppose you do.
Spectral Lotus might pop
I
out.
don't see why not. Don't look at me, you're the PvP designer.
Okay. We'll figure it out. I gotta figure that with Dave. Alright.
What's the big guy that comes out of this?
What's the what?
The biggest guy you get out of this guy?
The biggest thing?
Argus.
Argus, probably? Yeah, Argus is this flying Death Star type machine that's activate to either void an opposing card or deal 5 damage to all opposing champions. So yeah, it's pretty nasty. Here's just one more transformation example. This is Tatalka, Orc Gladiator. So she's a lady orc who's not to be messed with. She basically, the story that's being told here is, first you can pay 4 and activate her, and she'll battle an opposing troop. So they'll deal damage equal to their attack to each other. And then if she survives, she transforms into Tatalka, the High Cleric. So basically in the Orc Society, you have to win so many bouts in the Gladiator arena before you join this kind of High Council. And this is her winning her last fight and then transforming into this High Cleric, where she says, she becomes a 5/5, and she says all of your cards deal double damage. So your troops, your actions, everything. So extremely powerful.
It's not fun to be on the other side of the table when that's up there.
And then, because we haven't seen the actual, we've just seen rares and commons and uncommons so far, so we threw a couple of legendary cards here on the end. And, you know, legendary cards, we try to make sure that they are really awesome. We don't want you to read a legendary card and go, eh. So if you do, we didn't do a great job at our jobs. So we have this guy, High Tomb Lord. He's a 6 cost. He's a necrotic warrior. And he gets +1/+1 for each card in all graveyards. So your graveyard, your opponent's graveyard. If you're in the middle of a raid, for example, that'll be 3 times as many graveyards. And so he gets extremely enormous very quickly.
Goes great with Nightmare too.
Yeah, that's right. And then the Eternal Guardian here. This guy is quite obnoxious, but 8 cost, 5/5. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and other troops you control. So your champion can no longer take damage, which means it's very difficult for you to lose the game. And all your other guys can't take damage anymore either. And if you have 2 of that guy in play, they'll actually protect each other as well. So kind of get a little bit of a little brutal lockout that way. But it costs 8, so that's the. But if you get him in play, it's really brutal. That's the end.
All right, so we're halfway through, which was perfectly timed, Ben. That was perfect. So we want to go ahead and take questions. Open it up to all your different questions. All right, so why don't I start down here?
When will the beta be open?
All right, good question to start with. So the alpha is planned for the end of September. And then when alpha launches, the goal for alpha is that we're going to have, you'll start off with a collection of 4 of every card. You're going to be able to make decks, save decks, play against other people. And that's going to be the starting point. And then slowly, week after week, we'll continue to roll new features out all the way up till beta. And when we have a nice list of features we'd like for our beta. And when that's going to occur, my hope is that it's several months after alpha, but that's sort of a variable right now. And I don't want to make a hard promise because game development is pretty tricky. So alpha though is end of September, give a week or so, and I think that's going to be the first chance for everyone to jump in and really start playing the game.
All right, I realize you might not be able to tell us this just yet, but can we learn what the 5 shards are all called and what the, you said 3 races per faction? So 6
4 races.
Okay, 4. So can we learn what those are as well, possibly?
Absolutely. So the 5 shards are Blood, Wild, Ruby, Diamond, and Sapphire. And then I'll throw out one other little tidbit. The Blood and Wild magic are kind of special in this way that they are, thematically, they're unique kind of to Entrath, the planet. They've always been there, as the planet's always been there. And then the Ruby, Diamond, and Sapphire shards are the new magics that were introduced when Hex, the comet, kind of crashed through the planet. The 8 races, on the Ardent side, the 4 races are humans, Coyotal, Elves, and Orcs. And in the Underworld faction, the 4 races are Shinhair, which are the little rabbit guys, Dwarves, Venom, and Necrotic.
I should also say too, for people who are new to Hex, we have a website, HexTCG.com, that has a ton of information on it also. We can really get really deep on most of the stuff in the game.
Hey, I was wondering if you could give sort of a eulogy for the WoW TCG, sort of what you took from it, what happened with it, and what are its influences in this game, and then also talk a little bit about Hearthstone and the kind of pressure you're feeling from its popularity.
No.
Very good.
So a lot of CCGs in tournament play, they deal with sort of banned cards and so on, and if it's a printed game, you can't sort of take them back. I was wondering what you were going to do in this case, since you could technically replace people's cards or nerf them while they're still using them and so on. Just wondering.
Sorry, just to make sure I understand the question. Basically, you're saying plans to either nerf cards or ban them or errata them or things like that? Is that what you're really asking?
Yeah, how's that going to work once the game is sort of live and people have bought cards and so on?
Right, so, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say, this is something that we're still talking about this. I'll kind of share my personal opinion.
I'll say this, we're not talking about nerfing cards at all. The only
okay,
things
good.
that'll ever be
that's
nerfed.
where I am, yeah.
The only things that will ever be nerfed in the game, potentially, are some of the PvE elements. So some of the talent trees for the various champions, some of the mercenaries, some of the elements that are, because of the combinatorials involved in PvE with equipment and socketing and everything else, make it in the billions and absolutely actually impossible to for sure balance. We're doing the best we can to look at the broad strategies and balance against them, but there's no way to be sure. And we don't want to trivialize the PvE content because we didn't notice some combo and now people can just roll all the dungeons. That robs the game of the experience that we want to give you. When it comes to the PvP side, we will never nerf a PvP card, we'll ban it. So if there is something so disruptive in the organized play infrastructure that the meta is destroyed, meaning that you go to the top 8 of a tournament and all 8 decks are the exact same deck, then we've failed utterly and we need to fix that.
And one philosophy we basically have internally is if you pay for something, we give you something for money, we will never take it away, we will never change it. I mean, once you get that thing, it belongs to you. And so us like erratating it just is wrong. You know, I mean, that's taking away something we sold you.
And all of the PvP cards come out of packs, and so we sold you those packs. All the PvE stuff you're earning in the game, and so those are the things that we feel we have to sort of keep on the table. We're going to do the best we can to not nerf things, not change things, leave it as it is, but that's something we have to leave out there.
So, speaking about draft, are you guys going to have things like Uncommon 1, Uncommon 2, Uncommon 3, like a regular print run of TCG?
Actually, yes. I'll answer this question too. So what we're trying to do is actually emulate the print sheet and hopper system that you find in a traditional TCG. There's actually quite a bit that goes into making sure that the cards fall right, so that when you open up packs of cards, you don't get 2 of the same card. You don't end up in a booster box with a certain number of a common appearing, so that when you do several 8-man drafts out of it, you're not seeing the draft pool be complete garbage. And so we actually have, again, one of the advantages we have being a physical trading card game company is this idea that we know how to do all the really specific TCG side of it. And so we're actually creating an algorithm that emulates the print process and hopper system that makes traditional TCGs work.
As a follow-up to that question, are we going to be allowed to buy things like as a box in a series, basically, to eliminate being able, basically, the RNG of missing all of the things? Can we buy just like a box of them to have a better chance of getting the things in that run, rather than having them individually?
So how our algorithm works, it's on open, and so what you can do, when you open packs, you select how many you open at a time, and essentially what we're doing is we simulate physical in a very real way, where we populate these virtual hoppers with cards. So I go, okay, I need 100 of every rare, and I put 100 of every rare in the hopper, and until the hopper's empty, I don't put more rares into it, which means that if you open 10 million packs at once, you'll have exactly 100 of every rare. So it's an even distribution, just like a real TCG would have. We're not going to have something that over time, just statistics hates us. They're just a rare suddenly became an uncommon by accident because it just showed up too much. We're avoiding that completely. So you can purchase the packs slowly, earn them slowly, just open them in bulk, and that will simulate what you're looking for.
Does that 360 card count that you were talking about include the in-to-state transformations?
No, it does not. So when you factor in all of the transformations as well as the cards that are created out of thin air and all that kind of other nonsense, that is not factored in that count.
What is the total number of that altogether?
I want to say it's a little over 400. Yeah,
Around 411.
Yeah.
That is a coincidence.
Well, first of all, I'm really excited about Hex. I was able to get a pro player tier from the Kickstarter, so I was really excited.
Awesome.
And yeah, exactly. And so I'm really looking forward to the PvP. And one of the things I keep running into as I try to explain it to people is they keep asking me, other than the fact that it's on the computer, how is it different from Magic? So how are you guys really trying to distinguish that?
I'll start off by
I
saying,
didn't know if you wanted to say something.
you can go ahead too, but there are so many things that are different than Magic. I mean, all of traditional trading card gaming is on the shoulders of Magic. I mean, they created the category, so they all owe something to Magic, every single one of them, from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and WoW, TCG, every one of them. So yes, we did start from a place of looking at what core mechanics of TCGs were most compelling and what worked the best and what was most enjoyable. But then I believe with Hex, there's so much novelty. And Ben, why don't you talk about some of this very specific novelty that makes it different?
Sure. one of the things I get asked about a lot is the resource system in Hex. And it's funny because you either have to listen to a dissertation from me that's longer than this panel will allow, or you have to kind of experience it for yourself by playing many games. The resource system is actually, it's not the most obvious thing. Most obvious thing, which I'll talk about, is stuff like champions and socketing and stuff. The resource system, I think you'll find, and a lot of people have said this who have gotten to play Hex a lot, alleviates what I consider to be a lot of the negative experiences from a game like that. The resource system was built deliberately to both kind of improve upon what I feel is, a resource system from other popular TCGs or whatever, and as well as to be uniquely suited to the digital space. So I mean, some of it is just it's streamlined and it's good UI and stuff like that. And that also goes hand in hand with your champion. So your champion, charges every time you play a resource, and also charges when you do other things potentially. But that's cool because for both draft and constructed, when you get to the point where you're really drafting or building a deck with your champion in mind, you kind of have this reliable, consistent linchpin thing going on that you can build your entire strategy around. I mean, that's one major difference. So if you can count on putting a worker bot, an artifact troop into play every few turns, that's an important component of your deck. It's interesting too. I mean, in a lot of these systems will be more and more expanding. I mean, a lot of it is like Cory was saying, there's just all this digital kind of crazy novelty. There's just tons and tons of cards that we can do where we're doing things like whether it's a big system like socketing cards that are being socketed, or whether we're doing stuff like shuffling cards into your opponent's deck, or affecting cards in your zones, or transforming cards in your opponent's deck into zombies and putting them into play under your control. Or we're dynamically updating stuff like costs on cards. There's all this kind of new design space we're going to. So I mean, I would say the biggest things are like systems, new design space, champions, and the resource system. Those are the biggest differences, I think, and I think you will come to realize they're very significant.
Yeah, those are.
And a point on the resource system, we spent over a year trying almost every single resource system we could throw at this game to see what gave it the best feeling, like what felt the most fun to play with at the end of the day.
Yeah, there were a lot of different ideas on how to manage the resources, and taking into account, the idea of mana flood, mana screw, like all the different things that we've seen in all the other games that make for a quote unquote negative play experience.
Most commonly complained about experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what Ben was alluding to, the very long diatribe about why they're actually very important pieces of the play experience that are not as easy to sort of grasp when you're sort of first playing TCGs.
But also that we have, I think we've moved the dial to a slightly sweeter spot. But they are, I mean, that's why our resources is the way it is, because there's goodness there, but also can be improved.
All right.
Thanks. I'm also very excited to play the game, amusingly also a pro player. But one of my favorite experiences with CCGs in the past was running tournaments like at DragonCon. I used to run big tournaments back in the day down in the basement of the Hyatt, and I'm curious, will your tournament system be completely automated? Will you have a volunteer corps of judges or people demoing the game, stuff like that?
So I can answer that. Some of the desire is absolutely to try to bring this out of just being an online game only and into a more physical space. One of the things we're talking about right now, and I've mentioned in the past, this idea that we can partner with hobby retailers. Like clearly we're a company that makes hobby board games and card games a big part of what we do, and we have a real soft spot for the hobby retailer. I mean, that's the backbone of our entire business in many ways. And so we're trying to figure out ways that we can invite them into this. And so having a store have 8 tablets as an example, and allowing them to have a verified account with us, and they get a code that they can punch in, and then it gives them another code that they can give to each of the 8 players in their store. They punch the code in, and then they're in a draft together, and the store gets a cut of all of the money that was spent on opening those packs. So things like that I think would be absolutely amazing to allow, again, also our volunteers. We got a volunteer, I mean, we have, I think, like 500 volunteers that go around to the various hobby stores and evangelize our games, and we're super lucky to have them. but doing some of the same things, even where we have volunteers that also are able to log into that system. So they go to a store and they say, hey, we got this whole thing set up, and people can bring their tablets, and then they'll put on an event where you get to go play with a few 8-person draft pods. Like, all of that stuff is definitely things that we want to do. Some of the logistical hurdles are where we run into some of the problems. So when it comes to larger, I mean, we're going to be doing esports. Esports is a huge piece of what we're going to be doing. And anyone who's looked on our, or has followed us online, I've talked about it many times. You look at League of Legends selling out the Staples Center in 30 minutes. You look at all of the esports stuff that happens around StarCraft. I worked at Blizzard for a long time and had a lot of experience with sort of what that meant to the game. Hex is definitely all about creating an esports destination for TCGs, which currently there is no real esports destination. Most of the stuff for our main competitor leads back into the physical game. We want to have an abstraction that lives only online as part of your esports experience, but we also, as part of that, are going to be putting on our own esports events where you're going to come to locations, you're going to qualify, there's going to be large cash prizes, all the stuff that you would expect from real esports. So when it comes to your specific question of cons like this and having volunteers be able to set up, the difficult piece is that you require tablets, PCs, all of the equipment that goes along with making that happen, and then also the connectivity. And I gotta say, like, for someone who's tried to run digital events at conference halls, the internet connectivity is massively expensive. It's unbelievably expensive. And so those are things I would like to have happen, but there are some real big hurdles in the way. Hopefully the game is big enough where we have the resources just to sort of brute force it into reality, because that's what I love to do. So we'll see if we can make it happen.
As the tech guy, I cannot specifically talk about what we're doing, but we do have some solutions in place for this kind of stuff that are kind of cool. Gen Con was one of us. We were trying one of those solutions essentially at Gen Con, where we had a sub-tournament running of 32 people. So we do have ideas for getting around the need for an internet connection or minimizing it and things of that nature.
Hello, just wanted to say thank you all for putting out such great games, not just this one, but you all put out a lot of DC comic book game. All the deck builders you all put out, I actually own in my collection, and I really do enjoy them. I was quite excited when you all took over the WoW TCG. With that being said, I did think about taking the Kickstarter, but there's just a little something holding me back. And I think the one thing that was kind of holding me back from kickstarting it was, what is your all's personal favorite things about this game? What makes you all excited about this game so much? Most people accuse me of the exact opposite of, like, all I talk about is why I love this game and why it meant so much to me. But I think, let's hear from Chris and from Ben. Why do you love this game so much?
What I love most about this for me is the artificial intelligence. That's my specialty. I'm not kidding. I know that sounds, I'm a dork, by the way. But yeah, I got my master's in AI specifically, and this is an opportunity to craft. I think that video games fail on AIs because they make AIs that are technically good, but not necessarily interesting to play against. Like bots and shooters are a great example. They either hit you, they don't. It's very simple. So, so I've developed the AI to be very robust in having personalities, as we call it. Like, there's a character you meet in the game and you fight, and he's a racist. And if you play dwarfs, he just tries to kill your dwarfs above everything else. Having that kind of artificial intelligence is what really excites me about this game, where it's not just about, is it playing the cards technically correctly? That's actually an easy problem to solve. It's about, when I play a new game against a new character, do I feel like this is an actual character doing actual things in this world as opposed to just a robot?
The two things that excite me most about this game, the first one is kind of from a game designer standpoint. I've worked on TCGs for a while, and it's always a true joy to design cards for a trading card game. And with Hex, it was this whole new rebirth for me as a designer, because the game is built as a fully digital experience, and so what that meant for the possibilities of what we could do with card design is, it's through the roof. My brain can just go so many more places than it could before, and that's truly exciting. It's just all kinds of fun little things we get to explore that I never thought I would be able to do with a TCG. And then kind of just from Hex as a product standpoint, I think the thing that really excites me the most about this, and I can't wait until, some of you obviously have really bought into this vision already, or Kickstarters and stuff, but I can't wait till this becomes really apparent to everyone. This is the I mean, the PvP half alone of Hex is going to be as deep and robust and rich and fulfilling as anything any TCG has ever seen. And when you factor in all the stuff with the MMO and the RPG half and the story and everything, and just all the different stuff that we have in store that other, you know, with relates to story and all the stuff that other TCGs haven't done, I mean, the game is just so epic in scope. And I mean, this is also why I'm not particularly personally concerned about other, you know, they may be awesome, but other products that people may think are competing with us, is because, you know, I mean, every part of Hex is designed to be deep and replayable and last forever. The game engine is designed to be deep and robust. The systems are designed to be able to be expanded through the roof. I mean, games don't progress along a linear track every game. You'll notice that in Hex, you don't just get one resource on turn 1, one resource on turn 2, one resource on turn 3. That may be fine for some games, but you know, it's less dynamic than Hex's resource system. All that stuff is deliberately so that Hex can be a game that never gets old and can expand into every possible corner of possibility forever. And that kind of depth is the thing that excites me the most about it as a product.
All right. I actually have two questions kind of that don't have anything to do with one another. The first is because this game is going to be fully digital, PCs and tablets and everything, there's a lot of questions about how dedicated everything is to security. And while I know you talked about it at Vegas running other events and at Gen Con, I want you to kind of just calm everybody down about security and people trying to hack the system or anything like that. And also, Eric Jack wants to know why Ben Stoll is so short still.
Brutal. So I've been making digital trading card games since 2002. This is all I've done. It's the most fucking bizarre niche to crawl around for yourself, I guarantee it. But I've published 12 digital TCGs now, been lead engineer on 4. One of my specialties is the back end and the security stuff on this. I've seen almost every version of fraud you could possibly imagine at this point in time. I feel very confident about the way we're handling our back end. My last 4 games never had any major hacking related incident. One of them was Legends of Norath, which was a huge game in EverQuest. It was pulling 20, 30 million a year, so it was not a target for people, essentially. Free Realms was pretty big. That got spread out wide. In Star Wars Galaxy's TCG, the Clone Wars one specifically, that was making, well, I guess I'm not supposed to say that yet. Anyway, it was doing well. But I've worked on a lot of these things and never really had a major incident. So I feel pretty confident about how we handle things on the back end. I don't know how much I can say. I can say that our entire infrastructure that manages your collections, fulfillment, and credit card stuff is actually hidden on a subnet, so you never actually know where those machines are. It's all one machine hands information to another back behind it. So if you want to try to hack the system, you actually have to get through the front door and then figure out how you're going to convince that computer to talk to another computer, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like they're front-facing. All of your stuff is not front-facing. And then, you know, our database, we can roll it back on an individual account level. So if somebody does, let's say, figure out how to open 1 million booster packs, we can roll that account back without being like, well, we had to roll back the whole game, because that's a goddamn disaster. So we don't ever want to have that happen. So this is something I've done for a very long time. I feel pretty confident about that specifically.
As far as why I'm so short, I'm tempted to just blame genetics, but I feel like I may have been cursed or something. Like, I've been this short since I was 14. So, like, when I was, you know, in 8th grade, it was fine. I was about par for the course, and then I just slowly watched everyone around me get taller and taller. So I don't know what was going on there. I was actually supposed to be 3 inches taller than I am. Was my projected height, which would have been a little less brutal, but yeah, you know, so who knows.
So you got hexed?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I got hexed.
That was awful.
Okay, this is kind of an architecture question. I know, Cory, you said from the very beginning that Hex was designed from the ground up to be tablet compatible, and I was super duper excited when we hit the stretch goal for tablets. Is that a release goal, as in the stretch goal is we want Hex to be ready for tablets on full official release? Because for me, that's exciting, because I travel a lot. And I don't have a whole lot of time to sit at home on the computer. It's more like in hotel rooms and airports on an iPad. So the prospect of Hex being on a tablet for me is like a big deal.
Yeah, that's actually, so we
Turn the mic off.
No.
That is a major goal for us, is your mic. Yeah, we've architected the whole backend to be pretty easy to go onto tablets. The biggest problem that you face on tablets is it's all about the resource sizes. So, you know, our art comes in currently at 2048 by 2048, which is a huge resolution, but makes it look really beautiful on very large monitors. But then iPad, for example, or Android, you have a target resolution. Nobody upgrades their iPad screen. You know, you can't do that. So I know how many pixels are going to be. I know exactly what things are going to look like. So what we have to do to ship on tablets is all a resource-related thing. Our backend is ready to build directly onto tablets. So it's all about, we've got to make sure that we get the resources looking good and also taking a minimal footprint so that the install is quick. You know, you can't, our client on computer right now is looking at 3 gigs. It's like a small footprint download, and then you stream all the background assets into it. I mean, remember, we got whole PvE, 50 dungeons, just insane amounts of shit. But then on the iPad, that's not realistic. So it's all about asset management. That's the biggest thing, is we just have to sit down and resize all the assets, and then we have artists go through and touch them up to make sure they look perfect at this particular resolution.
We've only got 5 minutes left, so my guy is all right, perfect.
So constructed is all fine and well, but I probably enjoy the most the draft experience, particularly drafting at a pre-release, so to speak, because it's a really good social experience, and also pre-releases. The social experience of trading is something that's great. The physical interaction of, you know, maybe having multiple binders, you know, getting to meet other people, exchanging experiences. And my only other experience with an online TCG, there was a lot of bots. I know you guys are implementing an auction house, but that's still very impersonal and kind of interacting, you know, basically with a machine, an ATM of cards, be it, you know, still trading or even gold or platinum. Is there anything you're going to do to mitigate the lack of a social interaction in trading?
I mean, there are certain physical experiences that you won't be able to replicate. I mean, we can't give you the experience of standing there with 2 binders, talking to somebody else with 2 binders. But I mean, you know, way back, I mean, Cory's vision for this whole thing is so much about community and really social experience. So I mean, you'll find that in I don't know how much I can speak to trading specifically, but there's so much woven into the game that facilitates kind of community and play interaction. I mean, you know, you may not have the same trading experience, but you make up for that with guild functionality and the fact that we can trade cards with each other and play test in a closed thing. We can run our own league. We have ways that we can comment on each other's decks and talk, and we can raid together. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
You're never going to get a perfect one-to-one for the physical world experience. I mean, nothing, and I'm glad. I mean, there's nothing you should ultimately take away from people wanting to get out of their house and go play cards together. Like, that's where I got into this hobby, and I think it's great. The problem is that when your life changes and you don't have the chance to go to a card shop in the middle of the night, you don't have a chance to go to a card shop in the middle of the night, and you still want to have some of that experience, that's where the digital can play this really incredible role. And so, no, we don't give you that experience 100%, but we do give you, as Ben mentioned, is a bunch of other experiences which are also super compelling and super deep.
But it's also, in terms of stuff that you can kind of, still moments that you can share and enjoy with people, your friends that are online, or you just call somebody and stuff, you know. I mean, like, I don't know, we probably can't talk about some of the plans for the holiday type stuff.
Yeah, let's just save it.
Okay,
but I'm going to take 2 more questions, this one and this one. Or...
Oh, yes, actually.
There you go.
I play a lot of TCGs myself, and when it comes to a lot of the online games, they're now, I guess you would say, freemium, where free players can eventually earn up to what the paid players have. Is there any implementation of that in Hex? Like, for example, a PvP player can get a legendary card, but eventually a free player can get it through so many battles or opening so many packs that, you know, they may have had to pay for, but you can earn them different ways, like from constantly playing for a set amount of time, you know, doing different quests and all.
I can answer that specifically. So we have probably the truest form of free-to-play game, I think, that's really been out yet, and it's probably risky for us to do it this way, but when you play the free-to-play side of it, you're going to be getting all the hundreds of PvE cards, gold, all the level ups, everything that goes into the PvE experience. You actually don't need any of the PvP cards. I hope you want them because they make the decks more fun, But we have a full-fledged auction house too. So what's going to occur is there's going to be an economy, and potentially some of the things that you're earning on the PvE side will be things that you can use to get stuff from the PvP side. So really what it's really going to be about is not so much that I'm saying, grind out this 5 hours of gameplay and I will give you something someone else spent $1 on. It's more like, here's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in a real MMO that's all about playing a game, and the net effect of that is you may end up with some stuff that, as part of a virtual economy, is worth something. And you can trade that for some of the other stuff you want that maybe came from people buying packs.
As the lead guy in PvE, I should mention that I hate those grindy out games. It drives me nuts. So I've paced PvE to just be fun, because that seems awesome.
So I just want to say thanks for coming out to DragonCon. I know that you guys could be at PAX, and you're here, and that's awesome. And that's all I got.
That's an easy question. Well, thank you all for coming to this panel. I don't want to keep the next panel waiting, but we also have one more. I believe it's not until Monday, though, and it's for the PvE side of the game. We got a whole bunch of stuff we have to show there as well. But thank you so much for coming out, and if you have any questions for any of us, feel free to stop us when you see us and ask all the questions you want.
Thank you very much.
Or at least almost all the questions you want.